about 1 in every 8 business current account that's set up in the UK set up with Tide. And we've grown to about 85,000 members in that period of 2.5 years.
Today I'm joined by Ali Travis, who is Vice President of Business Services at the UK SME banking superstars Tide, and has been pretty much heavily involved with, well, every feature they've released so far.
Ooh, not quite. I joined as a generic PM.
Yep.
I met George, who was the founder of Tide, over lunch in the middle of 2016. He showed me the sort of Tide app and sort of demoed it for me, and we had a good conversation. There wasn't really a role for me, but a couple of months later there was something came up in product and I joined Jump Ship. Since then I've worked on a number of different features in Tide.
Not all of them though.
Not all of them. I get very badly told off if I claim I've worked on all of them. So for example, the lending feature you're about to see in our integration with iwoca,
sure.
integrations with Xero and so on. I now head up what we call business services at Tide. So roughly speaking, at Tide we split the product. We have 3 verticals. Payments, which is everything to do with the current account, transactions, FX, and obviously is a very, very core part of what we provide. There's credit, which is everything to do around lending, and we're sort of doing some very, well, you're about to see some of the stuff, and we do some very exciting stuff at the moment. Mm-hmm. And business services, which is sort of why I alluded to at the beginning, which is everything we do around financial admin, so helping you run your business, whether that be through helping you with tax, expenses, payroll, etc. All these things that are a huge drain on people's time. Sure. That's on my vertical myself. So an important way of us acquiring members is through this sort of accountant partner channel. Okay. So we build tools for accountants. Sure. And then they refer their members to Tide, and we have a sort of significant partnerships team that do just that. But what you're talking about, the kind of how we build integration partners,
sure.
That's kind of managed within the verticals. So where we have an integration with Xero, say, that's something I look after. Mm-hmm. Where we have an integration with iwoca, that's what our VP of credit looks after.
Sure, that makes sense. Cool. So can you tell me a little bit more? You alluded to the fact that it's SMEs, but who are your demographic, and how did you kind of aim to deal with that cohort?
Yeah, so really it's anyone, well, all SMEs, all micro, small and medium enterprises. Okay. We aren't really picky on geography, so about 3/4 of our members are outside of London, so it's not sort of London-centric. And we have a good spread of industries. As you can imagine, it's more white-collar IT consultant focused, but we do plenty of construction companies, healthcare companies all around the UK. Great. Really, it's kind of any business, so your kind of part-time contract, all the way to the point where you might need a finance department.
Why did you decide to target this demographic? What was missing in the market that you felt the need to address?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things. Firstly, the gap between this concept of SME is a growing phenomenon in the UK. So it's more than half of private sector revenue and employment, and growing very significantly. It's sort of doubled in the last 15 years. Yeah. So there's a lot of, it's a big industry, it's a big sector, and it's underbanked. You tend to have retail products that have been kind of repurposed to small business products. So it's just like it behaves and looks like a retail bank, but it kind of is for you running a small company. Sure. And those, that's what quite a lot of high street offerings look like, and that's the reason why if you went to a high street and asked them to set up a business bank, it'd take them 6 weeks to do so because they need to do checks on you, your shareholders and directors, and the whole experience hasn't been full end-to-end for a small business. At the same time, when people have tried to bring a corporate bank and drag it down to the sort of small business sector, that also fails. You can't just sort of trim a totally different product and repurpose it for small business. So really there was a huge gap in the market for someone to come in, take a fresh look at the entire experience, focus just on SMEs and deliver that. So that's one thing. Sure. And the other one is, I suppose, running a small business is incredibly complex, right? So the average small business owner spends about 48 days a year on admin, right? This sort of like doing your bookkeeping, doing your expenses, making sure you're doing your filing, and making sure everything's ready for end of year. Sure. And the average small business spends they have about 15 apps to run their business. So there's clearly an enormous opportunity there for automation and for a sort of smart digital challenger to come along and disrupt this. Sure. Much more so than I'd argue for retail. Right. Yeah. A good example of this is, I mentioned something about a Xero integration. Yeah. If you bank at a high street bank, you have to print out a form saying you want to, if you have Xero and Barclays, let's say, you have to print out a form and say you want to set up a sort of feed of data from your bank to your accountancy software. You literally physically post it,
right,
and it takes 2 weeks to set up, and then they charge you you get the idea.
Yeah.
We just set it up in seconds, so that's kind of, you can see how this area is so ripe for digital disruption.
Sure.
So there's a real market opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we have about 10 delivery teams. So these are full stack delivery teams, mixed of front end, back end, QA.
Yeah.
They're also will have these teams are increasingly sort of, I suppose, self-contained. So we have architects and designers kind of on site in these sort of Scrum teams.
Okay.
And each one of those is led by a PO. We try to have a sort of a one-to-one delivery team to PO parity.
Yeah.
And these POs sit under typically one of our verticals, so they sit under a VP. So I can tell you I've got Rosanna and Freddie are 2 POs who are working in my team, and they're looking at individual products and aspects of what we call business services. We have we use OKRs as a sort of company methodology to make sure we align.
Yeah.
And the one that my team overwhelmingly concerns itself with is saving people time and money.
Yeah.
So we look at where do small businesses spend their time doing their financial admin. What is the biggest source of cognitive load on our members?
Yep.
And then we try and eliminate them. So I can tell you off the top of the bat, and there's good data out there from the FSB and other resources, doing your expenses takes you, take the average business 1 or 2 hours a week. And so if we can automate this away by making it very easy for you to keep track of things on the go, or automatically tracking and matching receipts to transactions, or feeding it directly to your accountancy software so it's all in the place you need, then we can measure actually the impact on time and money. So we actually directly measure, that's how we sort of orient ourselves as a team. We measure where people spend their time and money, and we try and solve for that.
You guys have been in the news over the past few weeks for remedies funding and being in partnership with Clearbank in that capacity. So how is that going to help you from a sort of a wider perspective? Sort of what's the involvement of Clearbank in that?
So Clearbank really are like infrastructure partner, right? So they, I'm not sure how well you know them, but they were the 5th clearinghouse in the UK. So for 250 years there were 4 clearinghouses, and now there's 5. So they're like absolutely fantastic on banking infrastructure and doing so in a modern way. So they do our, we partner with them so that we can offer sort of real FSCS protected bank accounts to our members, which we're rolling out as we speak. So they're a huge help to us in really upgrading our infrastructure so we can get to the next level.
What's the aim for the funding then that you've just received? Are you trying to do anything in particular with that? Or are you going to wait and see, or what's the? Yeah,
I mean, when you apply to the BCR, you give a sort of rough outline of what you're going to do, how you're going to sort of, effectively you're pitching for this award, right?
Sure,
so you kind of say this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to spend on marketing and so on.
Yeah.
And I think the reason we got this award is that we had a very clear idea about this problem, right? This problem with SMEs, productivity, and how a digital banking service can help them. And so, we have a lot to do to, we promised a lot that we build X, Y, and Z, and we promised a lot in terms of how we market the feature and get it out there. So it's sort of been transformational, not only for the size of the company, but also our objectives.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to walk through this. So we've got this carousel feature at the beginning.
Yep.
And then introducing the first bit of information, we need an email address.
That's right.
Stickiness, I'd imagine, so you can contact that kind of thing.
That's correct.
And then once we've got this loading screen passed up, we've got a clear sort of rundown of all the information that's going to be required of us.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped through pretty quickly, but yes, we tell people up front what they need to set an account, which is a driver's license, information about their shareholders, and a phone number, that's all.
So you're just getting the sort of basics in place real quick and real early.
That's right.
Then we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the actual, I guess this is where the user lives or where the business is based.
So you've got their name, date of birth and address really, which we've all sort of picked up from the ID.
Okay. Check's super quick.
So yeah, that's sort of quite a lot happens there, and maybe I'll sort of try and talk you through it afterwards, but we've done a number of different checks at that point, and it's blurred out here, but what we've done is we pulled up someone's company.
Sure.
We need to ask them a couple more questions about their business.
Yep.
And make sure that we've answered their shareholder structure correctly.
Okay.
So I rather wish I'd gone a bit slower when I was doing this, so we could sort of take a click through. Agree to terms and conditions, and then set up a security code.
Yeah. What's nice about this is at each stage you've got a nice consistency of design throughout there. We've entered that security code, and then Once logging in with the fingerprint,
Yep.
we can then be deposited onto our landing page. So one of the reasons why we wanted to include this part of the journey here was that it gives us a real clear drop-off point and a step-off point into how the user can get kicked off with the rest of their, or with using the product.
Yep.
The requirements from a KYB, KYC perspective, you need both, don't you?
Right.
And then, so kind of how do you decide what's needed, what's not necessarily at this stage, and then what things together at a later date?
Yeah, the answer is we do all of it. Right?
Okay.
So we do an enormous number of checks as part of that sign-up process.
Right. Okay.
So what you saw there's a couple of places where it's actually a lot is happening in the background. Now, one thing that was skipped was actually we have a sort of identity verification step early on in the process. And what we do there is we make sure the person whose details we're checking, your name, is the person who they say they are. So we're checking your ID, making sure that's a real document. We're checking your identity and making sure that it's the same person as that document. So it's you with your ID present, and that you're a director of the company. Yeah. So we do this sort of identity verification up front. Yeah. We then do a very large, because we know you, we ask you to confirm, what directorship you're opening a company for. Okay. Because obviously only a director can open a company. Of course. We get that information from Companies House. So actually all you've done is you've entered your personal information. Yeah. From that we're able to find, what companies can you set up? From that we're able to find, what directors and shareholders do you have for that company? We then KYC check all of that. So we KYC check your directors, we KYC check your shareholders, we do sanctions checks on you, your shareholders, directors, their companies, and all this happens in that sort of, once you sort of reviewing information, you click confirm, and we're taken to the next stage. So an enormous number of things happen in that small process. Sure. So it's a real sort of moment of delight, I can tell you, when you're signing up. Maybe you've been to a high street bank and you're 3 weeks into trying to set up an account. You've entered in the personal information you have in your pocket, and we've pulled up your company and said, do you want to set up an account for this? For sure. You can complete the step in a couple of minutes. Definitely. Yeah. So I'd say. So
leaning pretty heavily on Companies House in this perspective, it seems to work well for you.
We lean on a number of different partners. I'm afraid I don't know the number off the top of my head, but how many sort of different integration partners we use at different steps.
Just for this onboarding experience?
For the onboarding inspection, for identity verification, for sanctions checks, for document verification, for pulling this information from Companies House, for working out their shareholder structure. There's the list goes on. There's a very large number of steps. It's possibly still the most complex part of the app. Sure. That video would have shown you Jumio's SDK.
Jumio, okay.
Actually, Jumio. Yeah. So they're one of a number of different providers that confirm, they do eyeball tracking and so on to confirm that the person is there and they are who they say they are. Sure. And for us, though, it's very important that we do have these Plan Bs and failovers, right? As I'm sure Monzo or Revolut would tell you if they were in the seat now. Any tiny drop in the funnel at that early stage is incredibly important. For sure. And so you need to monitor and track this very carefully. So Jumio is our sort of primary method of doing identity and document verification. Okay. But we have failovers in case there's outages or in case we think for certain scenarios other providers are better and so on. We've now got that sort of quite carefully balanced.
How easy did you find that sort of process of getting those guys involved with the product? Is it something that you're utilizing via an API, or is it something which you have to have a direct relationship with these guys for? How does that work?
The answer was, again, it wasn't easy. Okay. So we were sort of the first people to do this, right? Offer this kind of immediate sign up. And it's actually a big reason for our success. Yeah. So we're able to get this right and so right. And if I'm honest, we use different providers to get different bits of information from the Companies House, so your sort of shareholder structure and so on. Okay. It's all API based. Yeah. It needs to be as quick as it is. Of course. But we were quite picky about who we used for different steps.
We saw when we got onto the actual journey and we'd completed the onboarding flow, you guys wanted to tell them exactly how to load money onto the account, or how, exactly what their details are, what their card's going to look like, all that kind of stuff. Little kind of sparks of customer delight, as you would say. What was the thinking behind there? How did you go about finding this as a methodology of doing it? And I guess, have you seen high conversion rates, that kind of thing?
I'll be honest with you that we have just out the box relatively high conversion rates. Sure. It's different
because of the nature of the product.
Because of the nature of the product. Yeah. Right? So I know some Monzo struggles with this. Like only a very small proportion of their members of their customers are use Monzo as their sole banking service.
For sure.
For us, it's sort of north of 80-85%. So people simply just use Tide.
Yeah.
So if it's very difficult to get set up and difficult to create a business bank account, and one comes along very, very easily, we tend to find that we don't lose people to another service.
Yeah.
Sending a card, indicating how you can sort of, converting people to actually fund the account, as we call it, is an important part of sort of making them active. But it's less of a challenge, let's say, than you might expect.
The next thing we're going to do is take a look at a process which we discussed in the intro to this, and that is a relationship with iwoca within Tide. So here, first thing to note here is we're asked for more information. So this is information about you, the website. That's an optional bit of data there, as we can see.
Yep.
And we're talking a little bit about the value of the company, that kind of thing.
Great.
So that's submitted, and then tap to borrow. We've got this real simple slider bar being used, a nice congratulatory sort of message at the top there, a good confirmation tick, and then we're told that we are going to go through a series of verification checks.
Yep.
So real simple, clean UI here. I love the way that this accordion sort of folds up and down, and you've got not too much information in front of you there. That's a really neat UI trick. And then loading.
And taking to a confirmation page, I think. Yeah. Great. Oh no, sign terms and conditions. Yeah.
And then a few of these real easy to look at. Again, folding away that information as and when necessary. And then
we have final confirmation.
We have a final confirmation.
Great. And this is someone with...
And that's our credit account.
Great. And that's someone with an active credit account. Yeah.
So when we're going back and forth with this sort of sliding, we want to make it as clean and as simple as possible to borrow, I imagine. And then the repayments are in a similar style of element. That's going to be quite, that's something I'm going to ask you about in a bit. And we're going to take a look at the history tab here.
So I'll sort of share, maybe I was playing around too much with the repayment side, excuse me. And then you can sort of see your credit history. So this person borrowed £11,000 today.
Okay, so that's all presented pretty neatly and pretty cleanly on the app.
So firstly, we were very excited about the integration. You have iwoca, who are very good at automatic decisioning based on very little information. And you have Tide, who can really get a company set up and started and have a lot of the information already that iwoca can use to make a credit decision. So right off the bat, we were quite excited about what the product could look like.
Yeah.
And actually, the end result, of course, is this product, which we think is the fastest lending product in the UK. So we've seen in the wild people tap, on the initial screen to enter a few more pieces of information, and end up with a fully funded account, so £1,000 their account within sort of 3 or 4 minutes. Right. So very, very quick indeed. So for iwoca, we were really kind of this was the first time something like this had been attempted. So we were kind of testing iwoca's API as they built it.
Okay.
So it was it was a longer process than we would have expected.
Sure.
But we were working with a very solid and very sort of strong team from their side.
Yeah. And
so the integration as we have it now, we're very happy with the end result.
Yeah, they're pretty focused on sort of the back end, aren't they? Those guys, they've got a really impressive tech stack. So I hear, and it must be a nice marriage. You're able to sort of look after the presentation layer and make sure all that looks good, and then those guys are able to deal with the decisioning and things in the background.
That's absolutely right. Like an API that allows the full experience for a loan. So this is entering, application, choosing to borrow, verifying your identity, and then afterwards, after you've borrowed, managing your loan, so repaying it or borrowing again for free on a daily basis. The fact that they had an API for that is really quite extraordinary. So that's why they're a natural partner.
Very good. And I wanted to ask a little bit about sort of pain points. Whether you've touched a little bit on the API there, but anything from a design perspective that you struggled with? So, for example, were there any requirements from iwoca in terms of what needed to be there from a design perspective, information perspective, that kind of thing?
They're relatively relaxed.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's legal things.
Sure.
And they're the experts there.
Yeah.
So they had a series of sort of. You absolutely showed the APR, the annual, the kind of yearly payment rate, and so on. So we needed to make sure that that was observed. But otherwise, they were quite happy to give us free rein to design the experience for ourselves.
Okay.
The feature is a revolving credit facility. So it's a way for businesses to borrow funds and then repay regularly, right? So it's, if your cash flow is a bit low, invoice to invoice, it's a very nice product for you. You can borrow funds for 3 days and only pay interest for 3 days. And so naturally, the choice of slider is sort of the natural design choice for an experience like that.
Sure.
But yeah, we did have design challenges, but they were kind of design challenges of our own. We were thinking, you saw the last screen to how you manage your loan. So in a way, it's quite tricky. If I borrowed £11,000 and I want to top up that loan by another couple of £1,000s, presenting your new repayment schedule in a way that's intuitive on a mobile phone is quite tricky. So we struggled with that.
Well, you seem to have managed. What was most interesting from my perspective was the ability to sort of to coerce that information, all of that information, and nicely sort of accordion it into the pages. So like when a task is completed, that automatically then shuffles back up the page, and so on and so forth. You can do all this kind of thing. As a really neat way of saving space, right?
I'll tell Andrew, our designer, he'll be delighted to hear that.
Oh, well done, Andrew. That was really good. The design language of the full product and how like implementing your design over the top of iwoca, was that different to how you would usually design a front end of a Tide product?
I'd say not so much.
No.
We were able to design, their API was quite flexible to how we built sort of the flow. So we were really given kind of free rein.
Okay.
One thing I would say is that, were we to build the feature now, because this feature's now been sort of live for, I forget exactly, but about 18 months or so, we'd very much have a much stricter design system.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of what you saw there were custom components, but we hadn't built a slider before. We hadn't had any need to. We hadn't built a sort of an accordion of questions.
Sure.
Were we to do that again now, we'd probably be much quicker, because we have a design system where we would just build with the components we had already.
Absolutely.
And it would probably look a lot more consistent with the app. So I suppose that was our design principle, right? Is making it as easy as possible from start to finish, which we do, as I say, is 3 to 4 minutes. And make it as easy as possible for you to manage your loan, almost as if it's another account. And I think what you just saw in the video is, once you have been approved, it looks like another one of your accounts. It's sort of a credit account that you can dip in and out of.
For sure.
And that's what we wanted to.
It's another tile in your list of accounts, right?
Exactly.
So we were talking a little earlier about the idea of sort of KYB and KYC, and then there were requirements which were asked for here. Who wants that information? Is it those guys? Is it you guys? How do you know what to give them, etc.?
So we have a lot of information about you and your company, as you can imagine. Turns out iwoca needs just a little bit more.
A bit more, yeah.
So they're very good at making credit decisions based on not a huge amount of directly entered information.
Sure.
But as you saw, there's 2 things they do need to know. They need to know your residential status, and they need for you to sort of say your sort of annualized revenue.
Okay.
Once you have those 2 pieces of information, they're off. They can give you a credit decision. So that's the first thing you saw, the first kind of flow. The second one was those questions, the accordion. Those are actually just to verify you are who you say you are. Okay. So actually iwoca, I mean, we do identity and document verification checks, but iwoca, they have credit's quite high fraud risk, right? Like if someone gets access to the account or they claim they didn't apply for credit, iwoca wanted an extra layer of security to make sure that the person applying was who they say they are. And I think they have a very nice product for it. You're asked questions that you know the answer to.
Sure.
Who is your phone contract with? What is your overdraft? I can tell you the answers to those right away.
Yeah, you don't have to dig around for those.
Exactly, there's no IDs or some sort of complex like that. It's just that little extra layer of verification. And we hope to actually phase it out. iwoca are very happy with our sort of onboarding flow, our security mechanisms. And so we should actually be able to lose that flow and make it even quicker. We think quite carefully about, what products for us are core. Where can we really build stuff that adds a lot of value?
Okay.
And if we can, if we make good use of the data we have on you, we make good use of the fact that we're able to initiate payments, and we think we can add user experience and make something on the go, then we do it ourselves. Okay. We only look to partner with people if it's a sort of adjacent service where someone is just kind of doing it better. Okay. So a good example of this is payroll. We'd look to work with a payroll provider, but we don't want to, we're not a payroll company, we're not going to build their software, and so we look for a partner for that product. Okay. Something where we look to do core stuff is, around expenses. So there's a lot of products out there like Expensify. There's no reason that we can't build something where you auto-match receipts and stuff like that ourselves better. Okay. So make good use of data and the fact that you're able to sort of see payments and we're the source of truth for funds. So yeah, I suppose I'd say iwoca is a good example of it's almost sort of co-branded white label thing where we make real use of iwoca's smart decision-making abilities, which would be very hard for us to replicate ourselves. Okay. But But it's almost the default. If we're able to do it ourselves, we try and do it ourselves.
Okay.
And that sort of sets us apart actually from some of our competitors.
Okay. So looking at it from another angle then, what's the next pain point that you want to solve?
It's one I mentioned a couple of times, is this idea of expenses.
Okay.
And we know that the majority of our members, we call them brown paper bag people, right? They keep hold of their receipts in an envelope.
Okay.
And everything's just this mad stress at the end of the year, or they spend 2 hours on a Friday making sure everything's kind of allocated for, and it's kind of crazy, right? So what we want to do is actually I think sort of automatically make it very, very easy for you to enter information to give your receipts to Tide for us to organise them. So you can kind of export them or give them to your accounting software.
Sure.
Like, as I say, this is like, if that came out of the bag as part of a product, it'd be incredibly valuable to particularly IT consultants and those sorts of businesses. So that's something we're very excited about and we're working on at the moment.
How do you go about measuring these? How do you go about identifying what you want to solve and how you do it?
So, well, there's kind of, I suppose, there's two ways. Firstly, there's direct member feedback. So as you imagine, we have sort of our in-app support. There's a lot of, we're quite careful to tag messages as they come in, if there's sort of feature suggestions, bugs and so on. So we have a sort of rich stream of information that we act upon that flows into Tide. So that's one thing. Another one is we have a sort of public roadmap, so you can actually see what we're working on, and we answer comments and upvotes and so on. So we look at that. So when we're making sort of prioritization decisions, we try to take that and our community website into account. So I can tell you, our invoicing feature, for example, something we haven't worked on in a little while, but we have this enormous log of feedback and information raring to go, and when we get to it, we'll contact these people, interview them and so on, and try and build the right product for them. So that way we I think we have a very good tab on what our members directly want. And then when we think, you can't just ask people exactly what they want. It's faster horse sort of problem.
Of course.
And that's why we think we have a sort of punt. We think that if we build something that just automates financial admin and saves people time, then we're doing a good job. So that's where we get onto the kind of time measurement and so on, and that's us kind of innovating and building new products.
We've seen a happy path journey there. What happens for a user when they don't qualify for credit, for example? What would you do for them in that stage?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why you might not have the happy path. It could be that iwoca is for some reason unable to run a credit check on you. Which could be because your address is somewhat out of date, and so when we try and do the address you submitted in the application process might not still be your address, so we're not able to execute that credit check on you. In that event, we actually lean on iwoca. They have great operational support, and they'll proactively contact you and ring you and try and get that, try and sort of get you over the line. It also, of course, might be that you get rejected, right? Small businesses are, I suppose, kind of difficult to lend to, and so you might not get approved for your loan. Now, in that event, we recognise that kind of circumstances change quite regularly for small businesses, and credit scores fluctuate. We also don't want to annoy people, so the kind of the balance we've struck is, we'll hide the credit feature for a month or so until the circumstances can change. But if you're interested and you want to know why, we can always, what's rather nice about iwoca is we can get a human underwriter to speak to you, so you can appeal the decision. I remember them saying a big part of their offering is the ability to sort of offload a user onto a customer support operative or that kind of thing. They're good at that. So I guess they handle that for you, which is quite nice. Walking through what we've got here on the page, a series of different currencies. Someone with international currencies set up. This is the timelines, they're scrolling through their transactions. These are all, I'm afraid, simulated transactions. So but they're sort of looking at their primary account. Nice. There's a colour theory there. And what's happening here from a... recategorise a transaction, so you can keep track. So that payment armor was, I think, a salary, apparently. This is sort of basic expensing functionality. You can then, of course, export all this information. Here we see the integration with Xero, free agent wave, that kind of thing. So this is just the kind of the account, I suppose. And we're going to filter and have a look at all salary transactions. So you can see we've only got one of them. And you could potentially export that to Xero or wherever. So there's a lot of partners there in that capacity, if that's what we call them. We then click onto our Australian account, same process again. I forget exactly what I was doing here. Did I go through a sort of
And we're just rolling through the transactions feed,
Okay.
seeing how that
Yep.
works, and then a transfer happens between two accounts.
This person's clearly trying to convert 100 euros into GBP.
Yeah. So you've got the rate there, and who's handling this payment for you?
So we have a partner called Saxo, who are sort of our international currency account partner.
Okay.
We offer a spread of 25 basis points. So really, again, once the cheapest on the market, much cheaper than TransferWise.
How you identified this as an opportunity for Tide? Why was there anything particular going on? Your users were saying to us, I actually have like 3 different businesses and I need to keep them all in one place.
You'd be surprised.
Really? Okay.
So 15% of our members have an additional active directorship on Companies House, not with Tide.
Really?
And typically they have an average 2. So if you have an additional directorship, you tend to have 2. Some people have 12. It's crazy.
That's just greedy.
Yeah, it's greedy. And so, if I'm honest, the thing that made us, take, I suppose the idea behind this was we saw people creating separate accounts on 2 different devices.
Yeah.
So they'd literally buy another phone and have 2 different accounts on their phones. And we thought this is absolute madness.
Yeah.
And when we looked at the size of the opportunity, in effect, that we thought, if we allowed people to create multiple accounts, we could in theory have X% more accounts.
Yeah, sure.
It was a no-brainer. And we were able, with this feature, by building just a front-end only solution. So you saw here at the end of that video, like a sort of drop-up menu.
Yeah.
That is a sort of, I suppose, technically speaking, quite a lightweight product.
Definitely.
We were able to get a sort of quick proof of concept out, end-to-end really in about 6 weeks, from starting to having it and sort of onboarding members.
Yeah.
And we found actually, again, it was another moment of delight. So if you run multiple businesses and you can switch between your accounts in an app, it's fantastic. Our CFO,
very clean,
who runs Tide's account on Tide, of course, and has a personal account, he was our customer number 1, and he was absolutely delighted, so we knew we were onto something.
Brilliant. And so being able to, do your customers expect to see the same experience for both accounts? Do they want to see a differentiation between those 2 things?
It's a good question. So we launched it initially trying to be as slim as possible. And so you're told the context you're in. So before you make a payment, there's a little banner which reminds you, by the way, you're in company A.
Yeah.
And how you access the menu is almost a little bit unintuitive how you get to this menu. It isn't sort of ideal yet, but it meant we could get it out very, very quickly.
Yeah.
We then saw some feedback. Firstly, it was a little bit confusing, like that you had to use a unique email address and some of the other constraints of the product.
Sure.
And the second was that people did sometimes lose track of which context they were in. We kind of expected we'd get that feedback, but what we found was that actually 80-90% of people were just happy with the service. So it validated, yes, we should have gone quickly to market with this rather than trying to build this beautiful end state.
Right.
So we then followed it up, and I think we plan to release it very shortly with a sort of much more intuitive user interface. You can see exactly what company you're in.
Yes.
Very, very easily.
Yeah.
And we use sort of color codes and so on to make it intuitive.
Oh, perfect.
And yeah, we think that will make a much more rounded product, right?
Okay.
We'll then be pretty happy with it rather than it being a
definitely
quick and dirty.
So I guess, how does the onboarding experience feel for a user then, if they already have one of their banks listed? Is it a situation whereby the onboarding flow will suggest this user's got 2 companies, why don't you do them both at the same time?
At the moment, not yet. Because
Okay.
if you think about it, again, like we had this exact argument, as you can imagine.
Right.
So if we wanted to keep it lightweight and just a front-end only product, then we have a very quick sign-up process. You can go through where you saw at the beginning of the sign-up funnel. It would be quite a task for us to take you halfway into it, where you've already entered your personal information, and then you just have to enter your company information. And what we figured was, we're saving someone, we're doing a very large amount of work to save someone maybe 1 or 2 minutes of their time.
Sure.
And so instead we ask them to go through the same flow that they're familiar with and set up an account again, and overwhelmingly people have been happy with that.
Sure. I guess it's not about providing just in every instance the best experience for a user, but just one that they're familiar with and one that they're comfortable with in this particular instance would be quite a valuable tool. And so I think that nicely rounds up what we want to kind of talk about, unless there's anything you want to mention beforehand about anything you're interested in doing in the future or anything like that.
So I mentioned so what we're doing around expenses, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
We're looking to move into payroll again, which is something, again, I think people find very interesting.
Yeah.
But actually one last point is, we're going to be offering these FSCS protected accounts. So they'll be full bank accounts. Payments will happen immediately. We're really kind of stepping up our infrastructure and moving into the kind of, to become a sort of effectively a proper banking service.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big thing, I think, for our members.
Perfect.
It's an exciting time at Tide. So maybe one thing, and our people team would be angry if I didn't shout out. So we're also hiring, of course. So you go to jobs.tide.co. We're hiring pretty aggressively, engineering, product, design, etc.
Mm-hmm. So you'll have to come back on again when you've got this new FSCS product rolling out so we can have a look at it. But for now, that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much for stopping by. If you want to see a little bit more of 11FS Pulse, head over to pulse.11fs.com. It's where you can also request a demo. If you've got any questions about the product or want to suggest a journey for us to take a little bit of a look at on the platform or on this show, hit us up at pulse@11fs.com and find us on Twitter at 11FSPulse. Ali, where can people find out a bit more about you and what you do at Tide, or maybe just Tide in general?
Yeah, sure. Well, Tide.co, we have a community, so community.tide.co.
Yeah.
Or of course, jobs.tide.co if what we're doing sounds interesting.
Cool, that sounds great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Homescreen is a show about all things product and design, where we showcase some of the best examples of user experiences from the 11FS Pulse research platform, which includes over 2,500 user journeys from financial service products around the world.